Ladies and gentlemen, the powers that be have sent me out here to tell you about the pieces on this program. But I'm not going to do that. After all of these years, I'm going to rebel. So let's listen for just a minute to the voice of Maria Callas. I was interested in how she ended that phrase, those last two notes, that very smooth glide connection that she made. Can I hear just that part? Example 2, please. Now that's a vocal effect that can be fairly readily imitated on the violin because you can just slide your finger along the string. Listen to Misha. I have to say the name Misha Elman. That's here. When it comes to the piano, it's a little harder to make that type of connection, vocal connection. Let me refer to one of the very most famous nocturnes. It was Arthur Rubinstein's favorite encore. He must have played it thousands of times. It's this one. You know that one. And a few measures later comes bit of a magic trick of Chopin to imitate that vocal portamento, to make the piano sing. Of course, the example, as you know, was Bellini, and it was one of his favorite bits from La Sonnambula and so on. But that isn't as important as just the way that the voice can do that, and his little pedal, little tight legato and chromatic thing to make the piano seem to bend the pitch in that way. Now, you think Tchaikovsky knew this nocturne? He loved and was very familiar with Chopin's music. Listen to this bit from the Fourth Symphony. Press this point if I didn't think there's a more fundamental influence of Chopin on Tchaikovsky. Some of you may remember this. In another talk, I made mention of the German augmented sixth chord. And a man stood up and threw a rotten avocado at me. Do you remember that? It made a horrible mess on the stage. Luckily, it didn't get into the piano mechanism because that would have... He didn't hit me because I've developed quick reflexes. I know that the mention of technical terms from music theory causes some people to behave oddly. But am I going to be intimidated by an avocado? No. I will continue to make mention of the German augmented sixth chord, and in fact, I am going to tell you of the inverted German augmented sixth chord. Now, the normal one sounds like this. Sometimes it behaves like this, or like this. But the idea is those are the way I'm playing it that way. Now, the inverted German sixth. So instead of this sound was so interesting to Chopin that it appears fleetingly, admittedly, in that Polonaise that we heard last weekend, which he wrote when he was 16. And that was fleeting, but in crucial moments, he will introduce that sound. A few examples now. Play that again. Or this one. Or this nocturne. He didn't have to use that chord. He could have done a more kind of normal harmonization there. He could have gone. Instead, he went. It elevates that whole phrase with that sound. Now, Tchaikovsky picked that sound up with his ear and loved it and employed it. Just a couple of examples. Try that one again. Or the violin concerto. The harmonization to die for. I mean, it's absolutely. Now, that's just a single chord, but what about more complex harmonic structure? Think of this mazurka of Chopin. It starts like this. And somewhere past the midpoint in that, you have this section, which I'm going to, well. Something very interesting to me, at least, is going on in there, and that is a kind of ladder of chords. They're major chords that are placed in this. Now, the ladder is a diminished seventh chord. I'm looking for avocado. The diminished seventh chord sounds like this. It divides the octave into 4 equal parts. Okay? And if you place that chord, major chord, you get this disorienting effect. I'm going to play the Chopin bit again, and I'll stop on each of those chords. So start there, and then and he goes around again. Tchaikovsky now. Fourth Symphony. It's exactly the same kind of design. Yes? Convincing? Well, so I think anyway. But what you're thinking to yourself is, what about Wagner? Did Wagner know that mazurka? Could he play the mazurka? Probably could. The idea that Wagner or Schubert couldn't play, of course they could play. And when Wagner learned to play, he certainly played things like Mendelssohn and Chopin. Okay, so looking for a possible example in Wagner. Those phrases are built on the same ladder that we found in Chopin. And then it comes out where it was an octave higher. So it's making that same symmetrical division of the octave. And you could say, well, that's only Tristan, but I mean, what about Parsifal? Pause. Same design. Right? Now, there's another thing to say about Wagner and Chopin, and it's not certainly my discovery, and it is very puzzling to everybody. If you think of the first ballade, which Anna played so brilliantly yesterday, the second theme, do you remember the second theme? In a certain way into the piece, it becomes transformed heroically. There's and then there's a whole bunch of octaves and stuff like that, and that phrase ends with a That's that cascade, right? And the left hand, that left hand chord, notice that? That chord is F, B, E flat, A flat, F, B. It's not just the Tristan chord, it is on the very notes, the very pitches, and in the same spacing as he starts his opera. Now, of course, he adds something before it. Which, as you may know, in the first sketches became a more expressive sixth leap in the cellos. Is that a complete coincidence? Nobody knows. I can't answer that, but it's, if a coincidence, certainly an amazing one. Brahms, you remember the second scherzo of Chopin? This little nervous little triplet figure. And Brahms's practically earliest piano piece that survives his, he destroyed a lot of stuff, but that's a scherzo also, opus 4. Same kind of that nervous figure. I think Brahms is capable of a dreaminess, nocturne-like dreaminess. I'm thinking dreaminess, as in this intermezzo. Reluctant to commit exactly what key it's in. In fact, this is not the main key of the piece. So I find that somewhat Chopin-esque, and we know that Brahms edited Chopin and so on. Now, Debussy. Remember the etude that Danny played the other night? This one, famous. There's that dreadful middle section. I say dreadful because one dreads trying to play it. It's that's a horrible thing to play. So everybody, in other words, if you want to play this way too, you have to spend quite a lot of time figuring out. Now, Debussy, in one of his most famous piano pieces, Reflet dans l'eau, starts like this. Few measures in. Now remember the Chopin was, and this is going. It seems like an influence to me. Now I have only a couple minutes, and I wanted to insert a footnote to the discussion yesterday morning, just a little bit of additional talk. That nocturne that I started with here, has this phrase, right? And then a continuation is the same thing with a slight, instead of a little note add. And then a minute later on the page it goes. That second part of the echo phrase is given this flowing ornamentation. Now when, after a middle section of the piece, it comes back to theme, is an increase in the amount of decoration. And it's cumulative, it's successive, and it's very carefully and meticulously planned. What I have puzzled, or am sort of dubious about, is that when Chopin is teaching and he writes out a much more elaborate figuration for his student, I think he's bored. He's bored with the teaching, and he is amusing himself with that. Does he really intend for the student to incorporate that? It seems to me his work is so meticulously designed and planned that probably not. Do I know that? I don't know. Nobody really threw an avocado. You do understand, right? I make things up, right? Have a wonderful concert.